All right, let's begin and create our first actual promise. So we're going to create a new variable called aptly promise. And we are going to create a new object, promise, as you can see here, the promise constructor. What does this promise need is actually a function. Now, we're going to do an arrow function with resolve, with reject, and then the executing piece of code as I have mentioned before. So this is the executing code of the promise. Now this code automatically gets started the moment the promise is created. Now we can test this. Start of promise. See, I have not executed anything. I just created a new object and the console log is already doing its thing. So now, as you can see, resolve and reject are both functions which we can call from in here, from inside the executing code. Now, how will we do that? Well, let's set a simple timeout of 2 seconds and do it by, let's wrap that in different pieces of code. For example, end of promise. And now we're going to do a timeout. Now, basic function in JavaScript, of course. Oh. It's going to be one line, so no brackets needed. So for example, I'm going to immediately call resolve. What am I going to do in resolve? In the function resolve with I am done. And I'm going to do it after 2 seconds. So 2000 milliseconds. As you can see, nothing is happening. I am done is nowhere to be found and nothing is being done. Well, sort of. Now, this resolve function, we have to capture that. Well, and how will we do that? With consumer methods. So, for example, I have the variable promise, which is the variable from here, as you can see, the highlighting. And our first consumer method is then. Now, then expects a couple of functions. Let's see if I have params. Well, as you can see, you can use the in the IDE, you can use the documentation to your advantage, of course, to find out what it needs even without looking it up on the internet. So for example, it needs two parameters, unfulfilled. So when resolve is called, it will call this parameter, which is a callback function. And of course, we have this parameter on rejected, which is a callback function when the promise is rejected. Okay, so two functions, we can do that. We'll use the arrow notation to be fast. Now, the function itself always gives a value. So for example, you can create just x and y as values, or we're gonna name them aptly result. Of course, the content of that function. Let's just print result. And of course, the next function, we'll call that variable error. Console log error. So now we have two functions in then, and we will see, bam, I am done. So after 2 seconds, resolve is called, resolve is here, thrown back to the first parameter, and this will actually, you do something with the result. If I were to throw an error immediately, reject, it's broken, you will see that it automatically, directly throws it's broken. Now, remember that I said that promises were final once the state changes? Well, the state has been fulfilled, reject has been called, the promise has changed to fulfilled with the value of it's broken, and it will not change again. So even after 2 seconds, if this calls, nothing will happen because it's already rejected. Okay, so we have two more consumer methods, which are fairly easy. Catch. Catch is very simply promise.catch, which is very simply the same as just leaving this empty. So say that here I do this. I do not have a function for the success. I don't need it. I will not use it. Or I will, and I only use this function for error. It's basically the same. So when do you use catch? If you only want to catch errors and the content, like you do not need the result of the promise, you just need to make sure that you catch any errors. You can do the same here. So the same will be error console log test. So syntax error, of course, here. Test, it's broken. So it's called twice because I'm listening to it twice. I'm listening to it here. I'm listening to it here. You can perfectly do this and remove that. So now you have a result and an error and it's broken. Uncaught in promise, it's broken. It's probably here. So we have two. Last one is finally. Now finally is called even if both of these are not triggered or even if they are triggered. So finally is always called. You can chain those. Finally. Console log. It is done. I'm going to stop the reject and just see what happens. Start, and I am done, it is done. Since this is chaining after this, it will log after this. You can place it before that as well, but if it's finally, then even before the state is done, it's done. Okay, so now we've seen the three consumer methods, namely then, catch, and finally. Now that we've seen how to create our own promises and how to consume them, now we can look at where promises are used, mostly in async and await, and of course in the fetch API. See you in the next video.